Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today I've got a comparison video and I want to take a look at these two Kizers. Number one, they're similar in size, they're similar in price point, they're similar in materials, but there's an underlying theme to these two knives that I think is going to be an interesting discussion. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that before we get into this. The Corto, I would suggest, is a user knife through and through. You know, if you're looking for one of the most practical, usable, carryable EDC knives out there, the Corto is definitely on the short list. The Lancer, although not as practical, is certainly more beautiful, and the design is definitely more flowing and consistent and attractive overall. All right, so I would love to hear from you guys. Which of those two themes, I guess, do you emphasize more in your knife hobby? Do you like the knives that are very visually interesting and have some little details that are worth appreciating, like a milled clip and these really attractive holes here with the different color anodizations? Or do you prefer something a little more usable, like this really practical full flat grind, this very reliable washer pivot over the bearing pivot, and a little more room and a little nicer ergonomics on the handle? Which of those do you prefer? Which of these two knives would you say, no, the Lancer is so much prettier that I'd make those sacrifices? Or would you say, nah, you know, for me, a knife is a tool, and I definitely want a tool that I can use and carry, and that's where I get my joy, okay? And I will say, there's a lot of cool features and a lot of cool factor in both of these knives, but they're just different, okay? This one I love because of the details and because of it's visually interesting. This one I love because it's one of the most useful practical folders out there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your take on that dichotomy, and I think you'll probably kind of get a sense for where I land on this as we work our way through the comparison, beginning with size and weight. So let's start off with the Lancer 2. This guy is 7 3/4 inches overall with a 3 3/8 inch blade, a 4 3/8 inch handle, and weighs in at 4 ounces. It is slim and comfortable and carries very, very nicely in pocket, as well as being very useful. So, you know, usefulness for convenience, I think the Lancer does really well. Moving on to the Corto, this guy is shorter at 7 5/8, but it has a 3 1/2 inch blade. In fact, it's just a hair under 3 1/2 inches, 4 5/16 on the handle. So in fact, a little bit shorter handle, but only weighs in at 3.6 ounces. So it's a little bit lighter. Again, it is very slim, very comfortable in pocket, carries like an absolute dream. So both of these carry very well. Both of them are, again, similar in size. Well, the Corto does a little better job in terms of blade to handle ratio. In fact, it does an exceptional job in terms of blade to handle ratio. To get a 3 1/2 inch blade in a 7 5/8 inch knife is pretty efficient, okay? That's really, really nice, and that's one of the things that really makes me love the Kizer Corto, is that excellent blade to handle ratio, and one of the reasons I enjoy carrying it so much. So now that we've kind of talked about that, let's go on and take a closer look at these blades. On the Lancer, we've got S35 VN steel, bead blast finish, clip point with a hollow grind, nice recurve here, lots of belly, and very, very thin behind the edge. In terms of usefulness, this is a blade that's going to slice like crazy, and it's going to slice even better because you're only putting a very small amount of surface area onto whatever you happen to be cutting when you first start that cut. It's also going to work really well for any kind of rope or cardboard that you can kind of get that recurve into the material. Really, really good cutting tool for sure, and S35 VN is great. The biggest, I guess, detraction I would have for this knife is definitely the bead blasted finish. I'm not a fan of bead blast. It just shows wear too easily. All right, now you can see there's not, you know, this one's not showing wear that bad, and I have cut up some cardboard and I have cut up a bunch of different things with it, but I can tell you this, if in cutting that cardboard I had hit, say, a staple or even, you know, something hard, you know, maybe even some hard glue in there as I was working my way through, you would see that mark. I've just been fortunate that it didn't happen yet, but it definitely eventually will happen, that a bead blasted blade, that's a mouthful, is going to show wear more readily than a stone washer. So moving on here to the Corto, we have this sort of modified drop point. You know, we've got sort of a drop worn cliff-ish blade here, which is very, very attractive. Nice and thin behind the edge, full flat grind, again S35VN. So great for corrosion resistance, great for edge retention. Still very slicey blade, highly useful, great for, you know, food prep, apples, you know, tomatoes, whatever slicing task you want to perform. I will say these are similar in terms of how they perform your average cutting task. However, you do get more blade length with this guy, and you do get a very practical blade shape, okay? Not that recurves aren't practical. They're, you know, blades with a recurve are done for a reason. They do cut very, very well. I think for a lot of people, though, they're going to find the fact that you can get this more of this blade in contact with your cutting surface is going to be a bit of a plus. All right. I'm not really going to comment on sharpening because honestly, when I sharpen both of these, I use a Spyderco Sharp Maker, and there's no difference. Okay. So those are the two blades. Where do I think this, where am I going to land on this comparison? Well, I'm definitely got to land on the Corto side of this equation. You're getting more cutting edge, you're getting a more durable finish, and you're getting a little more practical blade shape, although the Lancer is still very, very good. And so far, guys, you can see that the Corto is kind of pulling ahead. I would call the Corto a win in terms of size and weight. I would call the Corto a win in terms of blade shape. What about lockup and deployment? This is where the most significant difference is going to be between these two. Sorry for the changing light there if you're noticing that. It's a little bit windy today, and the odd time a big gust will come and blow the curtain open, and then you get a bit of a blast of sunlight. So anyway, bear with me on that one. I'm not shutting the window because it'll be way too hot for me doing this video, even though I know you guys won't notice on the other end. So lockup and deployment. Well, on the Lancer, we have a very nicely done bearing flipper. The detent is great. It flips out with authority. It's smooth. The lockup is easy to actuate. It's, you know, all the things that you would basically expect from a modern titanium frame lock flipper. It really is. It's smooth. It's solid. There's no blade play. It drops under its own weight, and that's pretty impressive considering this is a smaller blade. So yeah, there's a lot to say about the action on the Lancer. It's very, very nice. Switching over to the Corto, you may notice it still basically drops shut until I allow the spring tension on that blade to contact, or I mean the spring tension on the lock bar to contact that blade and slow it down. This is on washers. Now, I will say this, I have modified this just a little. I reversed the phosphor bronze and Teflon washers. So when it shipped from the factory, the Teflon was in contact with the blade. I have flipped that, so now the phosphor bronze is in contact with the blade, and it has improved the action a fair bit. By the way, I've had both of these apart for cleaning. I probably should have taken some pictures, but I didn't. I may, if I'm feeling ambitious, take a couple pictures of the inside of the Lancer before I get to the full review on that knife, because there is an interesting point to show there. But for now, we have to kind of discuss the difference between whether we would prefer a very smooth, very well-tuned thumb stud deployment with washers, or whether we prefer a very smooth, very well-tuned bearing deployment with a flipper. And could you put the flipper on this knife or whatever? Yeah, that's fine. And I think this knife is smooth enough that it would still work quite well. For my mileage, you know, from I guess here's how we're going to have to break this down. From a user standpoint, I think the Corto with its washers is going to hold up better if there's a little bit of dirt and grime, especially, you know, if you're carrying this in your pocket all the time. There's pocket lint, there's dust, there's dirt. You're not going to have to take this guy apart as often. Although my knives that are on washers, I do take them apart and clean them up from time to time, and you will notice a marked improvement. A knife with bearings, you're going to have to be a little more attentive to. It's going to get gummed up if you leave it for prolonged periods of time. Okay, so for that reason, I definitely like the Corto. However, I won't deny the fact that the detent on the Lancer and the smoothness of that pivot is very, very nice. And I will point out, there's one interesting thing about this, and Kizer does this in a number of their knives. I don't think all of them, but I've noticed this on a few. the bearing race that they put in here is actually milled, so it's got a groove for those bearings to ride in, and I really like that from two aspects. One, it spreads out the surface area on which the bearings are riding. So instead of having, a bearing on a flat surface, you have a bearing on a curved surface, increasing the amount of surface area that bearing is riding on, and therefore increasing longevity and stability. So I really like that move. The other aspect that is nice about that is it does offer a little bit more protection. So now you've got sort of this groove that the bearings are dropping into, so there's less opportunity for dirt and gunk and crap to get in there. So I will say I really like that on Kizer's part, and there's a few knives of Kizer's that I've had that use that same process of a milled groove for the bearings. Which one do I like better? Honestly, guys, I enjoy both of these a great deal, and I've got to really call action or lockup and deployment, however you want to call that, kind of a tie with a slight lean toward the Lancer because I enjoy its action so much. Okay, so I'm going to abandon practicality just a little bit, although I would argue that the washers are a little more practical. I'm going to lean to the Lancer because of the very nicely dialed in detent and the smoothness of that action. All right, so moving on now to the handle. Both of these are titanium frame locks. Both of them have standoff construction. I'll show you that from the back. The Corto is a little more minimalist. There's just a couple of standoffs here. The Lancer, they've spread them out a little bit more. I like the way the Lancer has done the lanyard tube a little bit better. The Corto actually has a hole in it here, while the Lancer has a little stud there to put your lanyard around. I prefer that. From a design standpoint, so construction is very similar. From a design standpoint, you kind of have the choice between the G10 and the milled titanium. I do like the milled titanium a little bit better. I find this handle, now they're both 3D machines. So this is contoured. This is also contoured. Both are very comfortable. I do like these holes with the extra anodizing a little bit more. I find this knife, this handle especially, to be a little more attractive than this one. Although we could be having a different conversation if very slight tweaks were done on the Corto. They weren't, so this is how it goes. In terms of comfort in hand, the Corto is really ergonomic and actually gives you a little more grip area. So this has got about 3 5/8 of grip area. I know a number of you really want me to mention that, and I do my best, guys. I really do try to mention it. So here we have about 3 5/8. Here we have about 3 and just a little less than a half. So there's actually, when you hold this in hand, I definitely feel more cramped and more crowded on the Lancer than I do when I'm holding the Corto. In fact, the ergonomics on the Corto are really nice, and I am very impressed, and I talked about that in the review. The Lancer is still good, but it's not nearly as impressive. The one point, I guess, that I really like about the Lancer is this extra spot for my thumb. I do wish that I wish this was a full finger choil. They'd done something different there, but otherwise, and actually if I had a full finger choil, if they'd allowed that here, I might be actually praising the Lancer more than the Corto, but I don't think so. So that's, when it comes to handle construction and ergonomics, they're very close, but the Kizer is a little more, the Corto, they're both Kizers, the Corto is a little more comfortable. So I've got to lean toward the Corto again when it comes to this comparison. So who's the winner here? Which of these knives should you buy, or which one would I recommend the most? In all honesty, you've seen the comparison. All right. Here's where I come down on this. This is actually one of the easier conclusions that I've ever had to draw in one of these videos. I like both of these knives, but I like them for fairly different reasons. The design on the Lancer 2 and the fit and finish, or I guess the fit and finish is similar, but the overall cleanness of this design, the visual interest of it, the holes, the blade shape, all of that is a little more compelling. Okay, so this is, I think, a prettier or a handsomer knife. The Corto, well, maybe not as attractive visually. When it comes down to using the knife, it really shines. You have an amazing knife here that's, small but comfortable. You're getting lots of blade length here, a full 3.5 inches. It's ergonomic, it's lightweight, and so If you, and again, so it comes back to our discussion from the start. If you prefer a little more visual interest in your knives, then maybe lean toward the Lancer 2. If you prefer something that is just a fantastic user, then lean towards the Corto. By the way, I am thinking of parting with both of these knives. I've got a couple more videos to make, but if you really want one of these and you're still watching, go ahead and shoot me an email, clearkevin@gmail.com, and maybe we can work something out. So there you go, guys. That's my comparison between these two smaller but very capable Kizers. I think both of these Kizer has done a great job, and if you really like one or the other, I wouldn't hesitate to pick it up. I think you'll be very, very impressed. Honestly, I'm a little more impressed with the Corto because it's kind of a sleeper. It's not as popular as I think it should be. And by the way, both of these, I think there are some pretty good discounts out there to be had. I think they can probably both be bought for, you know, a little over $100, which is a great deal considering the quality of both these knives. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And you know what? You may as well hit the notification button as well, since subscriptions mean very little to YouTube these days. We'll talk to you soon.